Hey, this is LeGrand, and welcome to this lesson. Now, this lesson is all about terms. What are terms? What do they mean to me? What should they mean to you? Why are they so important to the future of your real estate business? How are we making our big money today in real estate on beautiful homes and beautiful neighborhoods? That's what this lesson is all about. So let's get to it right now. Terms. The entire pretty house business is terms. If there are no terms, there are no deal. We cannot pay people retail price for a beautiful home all cash. By the way, will any of them want all cash and full price? No way. Really? Just for the record, they all want all cash, full price. Every single one of them want that. But it's our job to give them an alternative and let the ones who want to decide that they'll take the alternative plan. I don't think I've ever talked to a seller that doesn't want all cash. I doubt you have either. So most of them, or all of them, will want all cash, but some of them will take terms. And that's what we're going to work on here all day today. I've got the scripts for you. All you got to do is follow the lead and let the seller make you the offer, not the other way around. By asking the seller questions, they make you the offer. You accept, deny, or counter. That's simple. All right. There are three types of terms that you're going to construct down there on page 6. It's either going to be owner financing, or it's going to be lease purchase, or it's going to be takeover debt subject to. My favorite is taking over the debt because it's so simple. My second favorite is owner financing, almost as simple, but not quite. And my third favorite is lease purchase, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm always going to go for owner financing first and lease purchase as a secondary backup, because usually I'd much rather own the house than control it. When I own it, I am absolute total control. I own it. I don't need to talk to the seller. I don't need the seller's permission to do anything, and I never have to worry about the seller not following through with their promise like on a lease purchase. When I own it, it's mine. I'll show you some examples of that today on my deals, and you'll see by going through here that my first goal is to get them to say yes to owner financing. Second, after that, we'll talk about lease purchases. Subject to is very good, easy to do, easy to apply, but not necessarily applicable even when the seller is okay with it. I want to discuss that today as well. I want to discuss the dangers of subject to for the seller. So by the time I'm through, I'm hoping you'll have a clear understanding of what you want to do when and how. What is seller financing? You're going to be surprised, actually. And look, you're in this class, you're tuning in, you're listening to this course, you know what seller financing is most likely. But you're going to be surprised how many people out there that do not. And I mean, I talk to high-end, multi-million-dollar homeowners, and I have to explain what is seller financing quite often to them. So don't be surprised if the world doesn't know what you know. You've taken the time to learn this stuff. In fact, you'll be explaining what is a lease option, because they just don't clearly understand it. And the reality is, folks, if they knew what you know, they wouldn't need you, would they? Aren't you glad they don't know what you know? Now, some people you will run across do know what you know, or at least think they do, but they still want you to do it because they just don't want to do it themselves. And that's the two kinds of sellers you're going to run across: the people who don't know, or the people who do know but don't want to do anything. Seller financing is nothing more than all or part of your purchase price in the form of a seller carryback note, mortgage, or deed of trust on the property. Seller financing means there are no banks. There might be an underlying loan to a bank, but you're going to buy it with owner financing, where you pay the seller and the seller pays the underlying loan. There are all kinds of forms of seller financing: first mortgages, second mortgages. In fact, on the next page, you'll see the forms of seller financing. It's called the Tools for Buying and Selling with Owner Financing on page 11. And it will take you a little bit of time if you're brand new to get your head around this. But honestly, if you think about it in macro terms, which I tend to do, seller financing is nothing more than you agreeing to make a payment to the seller until some point in time where the whole balance is due. The only thing that you have trouble understanding is exactly what document do we use to make that payment with. In other words, what document does an attorney prepare that says I'm going to make X number of payments for X number of time and explains the terms and then puts that lien against the property? Because these documents come in several forms and largely depending on what state you live in. In fact, solely depending on what state you live in. It's too bad that all of our states just don't use the same documents, but they don't. That would make it kind of easy, wouldn't it? Canada as well. Got Canadians watching and Canadians listening. Canada does what we do, almost identical, except they got different names for their documents. In Canada, incidentally, it's agreement for sale, guys and gals. Agreement for sale, if you want to add it to this page right here. I have a lot of students in Canada currently using an agreement for sale. In Florida, I use a wraparound mortgage. I could use an agreement for deed. I don't, because it's the same process to foreclose whether I use a wraparound mortgage or an agreement for deed. Many of you are going to use land contracts, land installment contracts, agreement for deed, contract for deed, bond for deed, land installment sales contracts, and several other names that states have adapted to put on these same exact agreements. Regardless of what the title at the top, all these agreements are the same. They simply say, I'll make payments to you until I pay you off, at which time you are to deed me the property. In the middle one, the land contracts, the deed does not transfer from seller to buyer. However, ownership does, legally. Ownership transfers, yet the deed stays with the seller. When the seller gets paid off, the deed transfers. You better make a note of that. It's actually in there, but you got to understand this, because going forward, you need a basic understanding of seller financing and how it works to be able to make offers and not make stupid claims, because I've had some of my guys say, in fact, one of them sitting in the room, names withheld, they think that when I sell on a wraparound mortgage, the deed stays with the seller. Not true. A wraparound mortgage means seller deeds me the property, but I give them back a note and mortgage. Deed has transferred. Not true on a land contract device. Although, in both cases, ownership, legal ownership, has transferred. In reality, a contract for deed and a lease option are very similar, except in a contract for deed, legal ownership is transferred. On a lease option, it has not. On a lease option, seller retains title, full ownership, granting an option to the tenant buyer to buy, but ownership is not transferred till that tenant buyer gets a loan and cashes them out. On a contract for deed, ownership is transferred even though deed stays with seller, and seller is responsible by law to forward that deed and transfer it when that debt is paid off. And on a deed of trust, to further make matters worse, the deed transfers but not to the buyer. On a deed of trust state, like Texas and many, many others, it's the same process. These are all the same process, but they use a different document. When a deed of trust state, the buyer still has full rights. The buyer needs no one's permission to transfer ownership once they got it. The seller needs no one's permission. And ownership does transfer, but the deed is transferred to a trustee, but the trustee has no powers. The trustee is only there to do what the buyer now tells them to do. It just doesn't go directly to the buyer until the debt is paid off. But the buyer still has full control and ownership, and that's the thing a lot of people do not understand. So, I'm sure you got all of that, and now you're an expert, right? Okay, here's the long and the short of it. Your job, you better make a note of this. Your job is to find out in your state once, what is the document that I want to use that'll allow me to sell a property with owner financing and take it back the quickest. That's what you got to focus on. That's all you got to focus on. And I can tell you, and I know many of them right now, but in Texas, it's an all-inclusive trust deed, AITD. In any deed of trust state, that might be the case, might not be the case. Like Ohio, it's a land contract. 2 months, you got it back. Texas, in 21 days, I got it back. And several other states, very, very fast foreclosure. Not true in Florida. If I sell a house on land or anything in Florida, agreement for deed or wraparound mortgage, I'm going to be months and months and months if I have to forcibly take the property back. Knowing that, in Florida, I am reluctant to sell with owner financing without a large down payment. Truth is, I can't remember the last time I've had to foreclose on anything because I generally buy them back peacefully rather than force them back, as you will too. However, when you sell a property with owner financing, must you go in assuming you have to forcefully take the property back? Yes or yes? Okay. You always have to plan for the worst and then work to not have to worry about the worst. All right. You only need to learn what documents you're going to use in your state once. But you have to learn it that once. And you should know it before you have serious conversations with sellers about owner financing so that you can explain. For example, if I'm in Texas, I'm going to say, listen, worst case, you sell me the house on an AITD, I don't pay, 21 days you can have it back. That's a big selling point in Texas. That makes the seller feel good that they don't have to go through months and months and months of foreclosure. Make sense? All right, what does it mean to get the deed? On page 13. You hear that terminology, you hear it a lot, and it's really just nothing more than internal slang. Because we don't really get the deed. Every time a property transfers from seller to buyer, a new deed is created, unlike a car title. Car title, you got to have the original title. On a deed, you do not. We don't need the original title. No sense to even get it. Because it's recorded, we don't need it. An attorney creates a deed from a seller to a buyer, and then the seller signs that deed, hands it to you, title has transferred. Title is transferred just as legally, morally, and ethically as if there's a mortgage on the property or if it's free and clear. The same deed transfers ownership. It's the same piece of white paper with black ink on it that transfers ownership of a $100,000 house or a $100 million building. When the seller signs it and hands it to the buyer or the attorney, title has transferred. By the way, there's no buyer signature on a deed. Now, in the case of single-family houses, I would hope that that's a warranty deed to trustee or a grant deed to trustee for you Californians. And you Canadians now, you will not use land trust, you will use LLCs. And by the way, in Canada, it's not a deed, it's title. Same thing. So, deed transfers ownership. Lien, however, mortgage, stays on the property. Mortgage stays on the property even though the ownership is transferred. So, when you hear the word subject to, what that means is we have taken ownership of the property subject to the underlying debt. Not assume the underlying debt, subject to the underlying debt, which means loan stays in seller's name. You do not assume it. There's no application to the bank. There's no request from the bank. There's no communication with the bank. We simply take the deed and begin making the payments when we told the seller we were going to make them. If we do that, we've just taken the title subject to the underlying debt. The seller has nothing, no document stating that they're going to get any payments from you because they're not. You're agreeing to pay their bank. You're not agreeing to pay the seller. I'm going to hope that's perfectly clear because you need to understand that when I start telling you that if a seller gives you a house subject to, they have no recourse to take it back if you do not pay. They have no recourse. They can't take it back. They can't do anything if you don't pay. And if a seller deeds you a house subject to, it does not go in your credit report. So if you don't pay, the seller's credit is in your hands and it does not affect your credit report because you did not personally guarantee any kind of a debt. Now, as you can see, that could be dangerous for the seller. Can you see? Okay. Sometimes we're not going to take it subject to just to protect the seller, and I will show you an example of the one I did in a little bit. Now watch this. This is a mortgage or a deed of trust. It's also white paper with black ink on it. Inside this, there's a note. That's the promise to pay. The promise to pay identifies the terms, the payment, how long, the interest rate, and so forth. By the way, it's that promise to pay that gets you in trouble It's not the mortgage. You cannot get in trouble over a mortgage. You only get in trouble over a note. The note is that thing you personally guarantee if you do it conventionally. The mortgage is only the glue that attaches the note to the house. When that seller transfers ownership to you, unfortunately, that debt comes with it. Be cool if it didn't, but it does. The debt comes with it. Transferring the deed does not change anything about this debt. This debt is still owed to the original or by the original borrower. You're agreeing to make that payment whenever you and the seller agree that you're going to start. Nothing changes. At the bank, nothing changes anywhere except the ownership. That deed is recorded by your attorney, but nothing changes on this debt. Just so you know, that lender will not recognize your existence nor talk to you without an authorization to release information signed by your seller, but that doesn't mean they won't take your payment on that debt as long as that loan number is on that check, and it darn sure better be, or that payment is going to go into lost payment heaven somewhere, never to be heard from again down at the bank. So you're going to start making payments on this debt if you take over a debt subject to. That just simply means the seller goes into an attorney's office, signs a deed, signs some other paperwork that's in here, and walks away, and they no longer own the house. Everybody clear on that? Hello? All right, good. Does it have a due on sale clause on it? Yes, it does. There's a big old long clause in all mortgages and deeds of trust that says if you transfer ownership, we have the right to call a loan due. Will they? I don't know. Can they? Yes. If they do, will it affect your credit? No, because you didn't guarantee the debt. Now, should there be a CYA letter signed by the seller stating that they understand the bank can call a loan due? Yes, there should, and it is in your system, and we will go over it tomorrow morning. I'm reserving agreements for tomorrow morning because I do not want to do them in the afternoon because you can't handle it. All right? So that due on sale clause is in all mortgages today, but it's not an issue because the bank will not call the loan due, and if they do, it will not hurt you, especially if you're not at risk. Now, again, can they? Yes. And just in case I miss it later, there's two types of loans that the bank will call due if they find out about it. You might want to make a note. Those are reverse mortgages and lines of credit. Reverse mortgages and lines of credit. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't buy a house with those on it, because I will. But it does mean that I'm okay with the fact that if the bank finds out, they might call the loan due. I don't know that they will, but those are two loans that you need to be aware that have a higher chance of them calling a loan due. Now, I still might take them over, especially if my intentions are short-term, not long-term, and or if I know what I'm going to do if they did call a loan due. In fact, I do take them over from time to time. I got one right now with a reverse mortgage on it, but it's going to be cashed out within the next 3 or 4 months, so what difference does it make? Hello? Okay, if you know something's going to be cashed out, does it make any difference what's underneath? Makes no difference at all. All right, look at example 2. Seller has considerable equity and debt, and you decide you want to stay in. There is an example in your book, but I actually have a better one, I think, for you in real life. My house. And there's a good lesson in this house as well. This house is located in Jacksonville, Florida, in Mandarin, right down the street from my home. And it is 3 years old. I don't know how many square feet, I can't remember. It's got 3 garages, 3-car garage, behind a gated community. Gated meaning there's a gate, there's no human at the gate, but there's a code for the gate. It's a new subdivision that they carved out of a blueberry patch, because I remember when it was a blueberry patch. And I don't know how many houses in it. There's probably maybe 50 houses in this subdivision, be my best guess. Now, seller responds to us, I believe from a yellow letter, I don't remember, and tells us that there is a debt on this property of $351,000 and that they are going to move in 2 weeks, moving to St. Louis. And they need to get out. And they've had it listed with a realtor now for 6 months. The realtor did not sell the property, and the listing was about to expire, but had a couple of weeks left on it. So I said to the seller, I cannot buy your house until that listing is released. So you got to get that done first. And he did. He got the realtor to send him an email saying we're releasing your listing. That's all I need to see. All right. He said I'll sell for what I owe on it, which is what attracted me to it to begin with. He had it on the market for $385. It didn't sell. So I said, all right, I'll buy it for what you owe. Beautiful house. Nice new appliances in it. Even came with a big old washer and a dryer. And so I'm sitting at his kitchen table, and he said, I'll sell it for what I owe. I said, okay. Now I'm faced with two choices sitting right there. I'm actually faced with three choices. There's three ways I could buy this house. Number one, could I take it over subject to? He would have gladly deeded it to me, but I got to tell you, I don't think he would have understood what he was doing. He would have gladly deeded it to me if he'd done that. That's taking it over subject to, isn't it? Yes? All right. But in the conversation, I learned that within 2 or 3 years, he's going to go qualify for another loan. And to make it even worse, he was a veteran. And it's a VA loan. Now, I knew if he went to qualify for another loan and I took this house subject to, would he have a problem? Yes. You see, he has a $25 a month outgo that he has no income to cover if he sells me the house subject to. So he would not qualify for another loan. Now, he may not know that now, but he'd find out then, wouldn't he? And then he'd be on the phone with me and he'd be all mad. And so on my other two choices, I could have lease optioned the property from him, couldn't I? Well, then I wouldn't own it. It'd be a lease, and then I'd chase him down when it's time to get a deed. Plus, I knew that he could not claim more than 75% of the income toward his debt to wash out. He'd still have a $500 a month outgo above his income. He may still not qualify for a loan. Make sense? All right, third option, which is the one I decided to do, is to buy the house with a wraparound mortgage. If I buy the house with a wraparound mortgage and I don't pay, he can then foreclose, and he can now take my $1,925 payment and call it income to wash out his $1,925 debt. Make sense? That's the choice I take. I elected that choice. I don't know that he still knows why I did it, and nor does he care, but I did it solely to protect the sellers, which incidentally cost me $1,500 more in closing costs. Because in Florida, that's what it costs to create a new mortgage and record it. Literally $1,500 on that size note. Today, I still own that property on a wraparound mortgage from my land trust to that couple. From my land trust, not from me. My trustee signed, which is one of my corporations, signed as trustee, and I'm the beneficial interest with my wife, and the payment does not go to him, it goes directly to the bank. You can see why I wouldn't send the payment to him, right? Yeah, if you send the payment to a seller and they have no equity in the deal, what's likely to happen to the payment? Yeah, they might borrow it and forget to pay it back, right? So I send it directly to the bank. I even got him to sign something, give me permission to do that, which is a little paragraph he signed at closing. So now we pay his bank direct. Now he's protected. I asked for 3 months before the first payment was due. We wound up with 2. So on the second month, I started making the $1,925 a month payment. And here's the rub. Here's the key. In the beginning of the third month, we found a tenant buyer who brought in $50,000 non-refundable option deposit and is currently living in this house. And I'm going to tell you guys, we turned down several with smaller amounts to get to the larger amount. And that's a decision that you need to remember when you're out here doing this on your houses. I knew that house would bring more than the $10,000 or $15,000 we were offered several times by people looking at this house. I'd rather make the $1,925 a month payment than take somebody in this beautiful home with less money than I know the market will bring. Hello? All right. And I was correct. $50,000 non-refundable deposit. Note the price $395. The realtor couldn't sell it for $385. I sold it in 2 months. I didn't sell it. My team sold it. I didn't even know what was happening until Tish said, "Hey, we got somebody with 50 grand." I said, "They're approved." They weren't quite approved. We did our due diligence on them, but hey, they were approved. I was sure hoping I didn't find something that I wouldn't like, and I didn't. So they're in the house. They're paying $2,500 a month rent, and remember our payment? $1,925. So we're getting $575 a month positive cash flow. I asked them, "How long do you want the term to be?" He said 2 years. I said, "Okay." Who made whom the offer? Who made whom the offer? I named the price. They named the down. They named the payment. They named the term. I'm happy with all of them. And actually, they wanted to put less down. We got them up to 50. Once it slipped out of their mouth that they could go up to 50, that's all we heard. All right. So, good example of buying the house and then exiting it. I still own the house. I get to depreciate the house. And I don't never have to contact the seller again, ever, as long as they live. I don't need them to sign anything. They don't need to sign anything for me to pay off their debt. Everybody clear? By the way, I'm going to take questions now. If you want to start writing them down, I will take them. And you guys online, you can submit them, and I'll answer them as many as I can after every break. And if I don't get them all, they might wait till in the morning, but they will all get answered. And Nick and John, I would ask that you guys actually pull out the dupes for me before you give them to me. All right. That was an example of a seller who had considerable equity but had a debt, and I want to stay in the deal. By the way, just so you'll know, as soon as the contract was signed by the sellers, just a few days later, I closed the house with them still living in it. Why? Because I wanted to protect the deal. I wanted to protect the deal. Guys, if you do the math, if they're in this house for 2 years, I will make, I can't even remember. I think I'll make something like $70,000 on this house that only came to me with $34,000 worth of equity in it. Because I'm collecting payments. I'm collecting $575 a month for 2 years. And I've already netted, I didn't net 50. How come I didn't net 50? Well, by the way, I put them in there at the beginning of the second month, so I'd already made 2 payments, but didn't I get one of them right back? So I really only out one. Plus it cost me $4,000 in closing costs to buy it. Yes, I wrote a check to pay the closing costs to buy the house, not knowing if a tenant was out there or not. That is dangerous, isn't it? No, it isn't. If you'd have saw this house, you see this neighborhood, it is not dangerous. I knew there were plenty of buyers out there. I didn't honestly know there was one for 50, but I knew I'd get at least 25 out of somebody pretty quick. So that's a case where I didn't want to sit around and wait till I found the buyer to close it. Are you going to be faced with the same decisions? Number 4, house free and clear and the seller will own or finance, but at full price. It might surprise you to know that some people actually want full price. However, if they want full price and they say yes, they'll own or finance, now do we have a prospect? As we go through the script, you're going to see how we're going to quickly separate the two by the questions, by their answers. Okay? Nowadays, even if they want full price or even a little more, but they're willing to own or finance, what does that instantly tell you your exit strategy is probably going to be? No, they want full price or more, but they will own or finance. Is it likely you're not going to want to stay in? Because if they want full price, you got no equity, they're probably going to want a higher payment so you won't be able to get a spread. So if they want full price, my mind is telling me immediately, this is probably not one of those golden geese. But it's still worth doing because it's likely an axe deal. Now, just for the record, if they want full price and they want a pretty decent payment, does your mind also tell you This is likely one I am not going to close on until I find the buyer. Want me to say that again? If I got no equity and I got no monthly cash flow, is there any reason why I'd want to go ahead and lease option it and obligate myself, or buy it with owner financing and obligate myself until I find a buyer? No. If it's a deal that doesn't give me any reason to stay in it, I'm going to find the buyer first, then close it, and make sure the seller knows that. You guys getting this? You sure? You don't look like it. I see blank stares. What the heck is he talking about? All right. In my mind, if it's full price, it's an axe until proven differently when I find the buyer. But I'm going to find the buyer before I obligate myself to do anything. And I've got the language in here for you to put in your agreement, on a lease option agreement, or owner financing, to make sure you're at no risk. If you don't have to do anything until you find a buyer, are you at risk? Is that the way you want it? All right. Sometimes you're going to want to do a little risking though, right? I did, didn't I? Now, I could have lost $4,000, couldn't I? But you're not giving me any sympathy because now you've already seen the exit. By the way, what if that tenant moves out? We'll have a party. All right, in this case, this is a free and clear house, and the seller says, I will owner finance. This is my favorite kind of deals. However, I would prefer I got a more flexible seller. In this case, they want full price. They want 10 down. They want a 5-year balloon, $1,250 a month, but they'll sell with owner financing. So if they'll sell with owner financing, what kind of agreement are we going to use? Purchase and sale agreement. And we simply put in there, we got 90 days to close. Guys, if I've got 90 days to close and I don't close because I don't find a buyer, isn't the deal off? What have I risked? My $10 deposit. My $10 deposit. Must the seller know that I'm not going to close unless I plug in a buyer that I like? Yes. So we're not playing any games with them. I find a buyer for $220 with 30 down. Is 30 a very reasonable down payment when I'm selling with owner financing on a $200,000 house? Say yes, Ron. Okay, I'm collecting $1,500 a month PITI and I'm paying out $1,250. So I don't have much of a cash flow, but $250 is better than nothing, isn't it? Okay, and I've already made the difference between 30 and 10, so I've got a $20,000 nice substantial upfront fee. Clear? Very simple deal. Out there about $1 million. Now I decide after I find the buyer, do I want to stay in or do I want to get out? In this case, up to you. I am getting a little cash flow, but that may not be enough to make me want to mess with it. All right. Can I apply that same technique to big houses? Yes? You know, houses like this. This is Joel Sangerman. We have this house, one of my JV partners here, like Dave. Difference is this guy's got one under contract, Dave doesn't. You're welcome, Dave. But to his credit, he just came in, and we did negotiate one last Sunday on the phone. He just got to get out, $1 million house. Guy's willing to sell it with, was it nothing down? Or, yeah, he did. Little or nothing down. Good monthly payment, beautiful home. Now we just got to get him on signature. All right, now this is the one, does that look like a war zone house to you? No? That's a pretty decent house, right? It's in Vegas. Make it even better. Here's what it looks like. What do you think, ladies? Can you see yourself in this? Huh? Doesn't he owe this to you? Look at it, it looks like a restaurant kitchen, huh? Didn't he promise you one of these when you married him? This is a $4 million house. It's vacant. There's a flyer that Joel created on it. So let me give you the terms. Now look, this is the exact same kind of deal. I just showed you on a $200,000 house, just that there's another zero or two. All right. So the seller's asking $4 million. Had it on the market with a realtor. Realtor didn't sell it. Seller's got other activities, don't care about this house, just wants to get it out of his life. And it's not free and clear because his payment is $25,000 a month, PITI. It'll make your pantyhose pucker up, won't it, huh? But anybody buying a $4 million house can probably afford $25,000 a month, or they shouldn't be buying the house, especially when everybody knows it's a short-term deal and they got to go refinance and that payment will come way down, won't it? In fact, they'll knock about $10,000 off of that payment once they refinance. So, very simply, we gave the man almost his asking price, $3.9 on a $4 million house. However, here's the good part. He agreed to take a 5% down payment, which is only $195,000 on a $4 million house. Now, guys, if the buyer for this house was going to the bank, how much would they require down? Answer, 20%. 20% or more. 20% of $4 million is $800,000. This seller agreed to take $195,000. Immediately, that ought to trigger in your mind, I see me a big spread coming on the down payment. Now, it also should tell you there ain't going to be no monthly spread on this house if my buyer's got to pay $25,000. Is that obvious? So I ain't getting any monthly spread. No way. In fact, I know that I might even have to lower that price, that payment to my buyer, and make the seller eat the difference. And I also know this seller will be glad to do it. He's paying $25,000 a month now. If he has to pay 5 of it instead of 25 for 3 years, he'd be happy to, wouldn't he? Especially if he knows he's going to get cashed out at $3.9 million. Hello. By the way, that's what he gets, $3.9 million. Full retail price for his house when we get a buyer in there and get him cashed out. So he agreed to take $195,000. We would owe him $3,705,000 with a 3-year balloon. Now, that's exactly how we have it under contract right now. That's why it's out here on the market right now. Now look at the proposed exit. Our plan, we got it out there for $4.3 million. Our plan is very simple. Find somebody with at least $600,000 down and get out of the deal. That's the plan. If they put up $600,000 or $595,000 and we owe him $195,000, where does that other $400,000 going to go there? It's going to go to Joel's wife and my wife. Where it belongs, right, ladies? Huh? That'll give Beverly more money to give to Harris. I mean, actually, I'd have to send her out to this house in Vegas to take a look at it. No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. Just kidding. All right. So if it works on the low end, does it work on the high end? If it works on the high end, does that mean you get to collect more? Because in other words, you get to make more money doing the exact same thing, but while earning more dollars. Right? But run the risk. It is big, because we had to put up a $100 deposit to get that thing under contract. So if we fail, what do we lose? $100. If we win, what do we lose? What do we win? $400,000. Just for the record, how many of those do you need per month to surpass your current income?